Because on the morning of 9/11, because I was in Connecticut, heard about it immediately, but to us it was a small plane that crashed into the first building. And the first thought I had was, because we had so many interns, I was a dean, and so many interns who were just starting their internships in New York, and the fact that a good number of them were going to Cantor Fitzgerald, which was on the top of the other building. My thoughts immediately went to them, and oh my gosh, this is about the time they should be coming to work. They're going to the very top of the building. What's happening to them? And as it turned out, so of course we couldn't contact any one of them, any one of the interns in New York, because you couldn't contact anybody in New York City. But like college students in a good way, they were all late, and they didn't get to work that day. Most of them were stuck on the subway, as we learned later when they came back and were telling us about their experience. In Cantor Fitzgerald, we had on average about 20 students who would work for them every semester. And Cantor Fitzgerald itself, based in Connecticut, lost everybody, lost all their employees, except for a couple that hadn't gotten there. And they had to reestablish themselves, and right now they're writing books about them, because Cantor Fitzgerald continued to pay the benefits and the salaries of every one of their employees. It's a privately owned company. The students, we finally heard it from all of them, but it took us almost 2 weeks to find them all. That's the number one story. Number two is, on my faculty was a man who was the uncle of the man who was piloting the second plane. And when you hear the tapes of the second plane that hit the buildings, you hear his voice, and there was a lot of controversy over, was he deliberately driving the plane into that building? Bob, we didn't know that at the time. Someone called me so that I could go tell Bob. It was his nephew piloting that plane. He knew his nephew was a pilot, but he didn't realize that was the plane. And for the next good 6 months, there were always these questions people kept asking and making it very difficult for Bob. Was your nephew deliberately flying that plane into the building? Isn't there anything he could have done to stop it? When you hear the tape, his voice is too calm. Well, he's a pilot, and he's not going to sit there, oh my God, he's not going to say that. But it is he who was at the controls when that pilot hit the building. And so every time 9/11 comes around, I think of Bob, because when I told Bob, he collapsed. A third one is that in the town next to mine, there were people who were working down there, including some women who worked in the World Trade Center. And they had gone to work, as they normally would have, on the train very early in the morning, typically. And in New England, and all this takes place. In New England, there's a tradition for the longest time that in your house, to let people know that you're always welcome, anyone's always welcome, you put a single candle in your window. And that lets people know if they're traveling. This is old times, but people still do it. If they're traveling and they need to find a safe home or a safe place to be, if they watch for a house with a candle in it, then they would know that that would be the case. In the town where these people were from, and these people were very well known, baseball coach, Little League coach, people like that, they have a town green, and in New England the greens are usually in the center of a town. It's where they used to graze all their cattle. And this particular town has kept its green, so that there's this huge, huge area of just grass and trees. And without saying a word, that night, after the first night when it all began to settle in people's minds, members of the community all came without saying a word, not one word to each other, holding a single candle. And they do that every year on this anniversary. And it's kind of hard for me thinking now, especially 10 years from now, that all these people will be on that green again, because these people never came home. And one of them was one of our students. And then the last thing was, you watched how it happened, and it was absolutely incredulous what we were watching. But from Connecticut, parts of Connecticut, you can see Manhattan. And it was further away from where I was, maybe about 25 miles from where I was. And I didn't feel any compulsion to go driving down there so I could watch the cloud or anything like that happen. But what we knew is that the way the wind was blowing, that in time, all of that went up into the air would eventually be moving, and the trajectory of it was that it would move over Connecticut. And when it did, it was like night, just like night. And you knew in that cloud was anything from probably parts of people and parts of buildings and gas and other things that would just be there. And so when it came, besides having a very eerie look about it, it was just a constant reminder when you went outside, because it took about a week for it to blow over and dissipate. So for me, on Sunday, this Sunday coming up, this has profoundly changed me. I was always concerned about students to begin with, but I'm probably, when I see they're on an internship or I see they're studying abroad or anything like that, I always say when I sign their name to a piece of paper, or like I just approved somebody's internship in Ohio, I always make a little comment, please be safe, when I sign it, and I still do that. For me also personally, it was very hard to learn who the people were that never came home. And for some of the families that I worked with, and like the student's family, there never will be closure because they never found anything. Although every once in a while in the Connecticut papers they talk about how they have identified some piece of someone there, or maybe a ring or something that they had on, and so that kind of brings the family to closure of some kind. And then lastly, for me personally, is that there's been such an ongoing debate after this event happened over what the memorial should look like on Ground Zero. And all the discussions, some of them productive, some of them very counterproductive, some of them very angry, all I keep thinking is people. These are human beings that we lost, and we shouldn't be talking that way. We should be coming up a way to honor what they did and how they tried to rescue other people, especially when you think of the firemen or the policemen or the clergy that came there, that we really should just be thinking about that, not what shape a memorial should be. So on Sunday, besides my usual ritual that I go through, which is to think back through all of these events that are so vivid in my mind still, I'll just be very quiet with my thoughts and hope it doesn't happen again. That's it.
Okay.